So Judaism and Buddhism are ostensibly very different. You picture a meditator sitting on a cushion somewhere compared to our Jewish world of minyanim and mitzvot and congregational prayer and an invisible God, which Buddhism doesn't recognize, or Buddhism's interest in cultivating the a breakthrough to the rational mind, as opposed to Judaism's concentration on developing the rational mind through Kabbalah study. Very different. And yet, there is something about Buddhism that seems to have attracted the interest of American Jews, and there's some kind of natural affinity. So I've long had the question, what's that about? How come? And this opportunity tonight to talk about this gave me a reason to dig into that a little bit. And when I tried to dig into it, I didn't find anything authoritative about it, but so I decided what I would do is I would talk about my own path along that journey, and that somehow that might shed some light on what this affinity is between Judaism and Buddhism. Interestingly enough, I recently read the biography of Rabbi Bert Jacobson, who passed away, Baruch Hashem. And Rabbi Bert, although his path wasn't the same as mine, it led me to understand that a lot of people from my age, or the 60s and 70s, went through the same kind of situation of going through, following their natural curiosity about other faiths and what that produced for them. So I'll share with you my own history, and hopefully that will illuminate something about this question of consciousness and its role in Judaism and Buddhism. And also, because it's Shavuot, we have to talk about then what does Torah have to say about this? What's Torah's view on this subject of dualism and Buddhism and Judaism? So I'll try to touch on that too, in a way that I hope is not too abstruse. So I was born into a Jewish family, as everyone kindly mentioned, almost 90 years ago. So I've been practicing Judaism for about 90 years and Buddhism for about 60 years. And the question I bring to both are everybody's question. What is the world about? How am I supposed to live in it? What's going on here? What's the right thing to do? And I see that for me, there have been 4 stages covering that question. How do I develop an answer to that question for myself, or why I, a Jewish person, have been drawn to Buddhism? And I'm going to use some slides on the screen to try to help you and I keep track of the arguments about this, about how this has come about. So I started out as a kid in New York in the world of what I'm going to call mainstream Judaism. And this is a core idea to what I would like to talk about. Mainstream Judaism. I was educated in the Workman's Circle, which is a Yiddish-based secular cultural program that includes religion. And I attended it 5 days a week after school for 4 years. And then I went to Talmud Torah, which was the conservative Judaism synagogue-based bar mitzvah program. I had no idea what the prayers I was saying were, but my childhood was filled with the rhythms of Jewish life. When I was a teenager, and I was observant for a while, I followed the rules and laws very closely. So mainstream Judaism, the central tenet of mainstream Judaism is monotheism, which makes a clear statement that, of course, there's one God, and God is separate from creation. What's called God transcendent. God is above and beyond creation, exists outside the world of human comprehension and the physical world, and God is not limited by the physical world. God's qualities are not graspable, infinitely higher than anything created. So this was the concept I learned as a kid. Mainstream Judaism taught me that God was somehow transcendent. Let's go to another slide, Sherry. My friend Sherry, thank you for your help tonight, by the way. When I was 16, my family moved to California, and my whole worldview changed. It became what I would call a West Coast sensibility. This was in the 50s and 60s. It was a time of tremendous spiritual experimentation and cultural opening. And as Erwin mentioned, as a young adult, when I was in my late 20s, I was very involved with a place called Esalen, and which was devoted to what we called exploring the human potential. Very multicultural, very multi-theological. And through Esalen, I was introduced to Alan Watts. I had the chance to meet and study with Joseph Campbell for a while. I entered Jungian analysis. I started practicing Aikido. So the mind-body dichotomy that was part of my East Coast sensibility gave way to a new sense of being grounded in embodiment. And this was, for me, a thrilling new way of being in the world. And I moved from traditional Jewish monotheism to practicing in Buddhism. Now, Buddhism is non-theistic. That is to say, there is no God in Buddhism, but there are, 5 laws of the universe, which are rational. What's called 4 noble truths about living and craving and the path to liberation. So Buddhist practice, very different than Jewish practice. Through that, I was led to a place called Shasta Abbey. If I could see slide 3, we'll go to Shasta Abbey. And Shasta Abbey was a wonderful place. It's a Soto Zen Buddhist training monastery in Northern California. And it was created by a woman, her name is Kenneth Roshi, JewBu Kenneth Roshi. She started out life as an Anglican minister and subsequently trained and was certified as a Zen priest in Japan. So she's a big man. You can imagine she broke the barrier, the gender barrier in the traditionally male-dominated Japanese Zen establishment. At the center of her conceptualization of Buddhism was what she called Buddha nature, all-pervading, ineffable, couldn't be captured in language, couldn't be captured in thought, but it could be alluded to or pointed to as what she called the eternal, or the pure, or the void. The way she described it was that it was totally empty and the fullest emptiness you could imagine. Think for a minute about the letter Aleph. Think about a silence so profound that it contains everything.
It's being recorded.
So that was a big step for me to be able to connect the idea of the emptiness to the Aleph. So the way she taught about Buddha nature is that it's the very fabric of creation. There's a quote I want to share with you. It comes from a Zen priest called Dogen, a 13th century Zen priest. Here's what it says. You should entreat trees and rocks to preach the Dharma. You should ask rice fields and gardens for the truth. Ask pillars for the Dharma and learn from hedges and walls. In earth, stones, sand, and pebbles, there is to be found the extremely inconceivable mind which moves the sincere heart. No God, Dharma, but Dharma everywhere. So naturally, to my Jewish mind, I made that God. That became God for me. That was the same for me as the idea of God. But it was not God transcendent, as I had learned as a kid, but it was what's called God immanent. God within creation, present and active and involved in the world and close to humanity. A God not distant or detached, but rather actively present and found in all interactions with the world. So this was still Buddhism, but it set the stage for my return to Judaism. So I was very lucky at that point in my life for a number of fortuitous events to take place that brought me back fully into Judaism, and very literally, I could say, changed the course of my life. The first one, of course, is I had met Cynthia, my wife. And Cynthia at that time was president of her synagogue board, and I decided to join her at our holiday services. We were dating, I was courting her. So I kept my father's talit all those years, and I went to high holiday services with her, and I put on the talit, and I had this overwhelming sense of coming home. I wrapped my father's talit around me, and my heart opened up. About that time, I read a book called The 13-Petaled Rose. And that book was mind-blowing to me because it described a cosmology from the Jewish perspective that had within it everything I had come to value as a Buddhist. I experienced a Judaism that incorporated the divine as utterly transcendent and completely immanent at the same time. And Rabbi Steinsaltz talks about multiple levels of reality existing simultaneously, as Erwin mentioned earlier, and the soul's level journey through different levels of consciousness, all contained within a Jewish framework. So to my mind that had been so steeped in Buddhism for so long, I now had all of that I had learned in Buddhism expressed as Judaism. And about the same time, I fell in with a neo-Hasidic crowd, which I'd like to talk a little bit about. Many proponents of neo-Hasidism that I'm sure familiar to a lot of people. Arthur Green and Rami Shapiro, Shlomo Carlebach, Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi, Rabbi Heschel. So neo-Hasidism integrates Hasidic mystical concepts with non-Hasidic liberal Jewish life. I think in our congregation, we are, to my mind of thinking, a neo-Hasidic congregation. It allows for insight and individual choice inside the Jewish framework. And it's been said, tradition has a voice, but not a veto. Okay. As a community, it supports being both and rather than either or. And so that makes it possible for me to have, in congregational life, a homogeneous blend of Buddhist and Jewish worldviews. And that's where I am now. I'm a practicing Jew who incorporates Buddhist practice. I call it for myself syncretic Jewish-Buddhist practice. I don't have a name for it. It's my name for it is it's what I do. And interestingly, the Star of David, Solomon's seal, is the symbol that works to describe my practice and my synthesis of Buddhism and Judaism. And I'll tell you how that goes for me. If you look at the Star of David there in the lower right-hand corner, and you overlay in your mind to it the Sephirotic tree, you could picture Keter at the top and Malchut at the bottom. Now notice about this Star of David that the two triangles are interrelated. They cannot be separated. I think it's so sad that the Israeli flag has a solid Star of David on it rather than this Star of David. Because the point of this Star of David is that the world that originates in Keter and the world that originates in Malchut cannot be separated. The upper triangle, for me and my practice, tells me that the divine flow is coming down to create the world. The lower triangle, in my practice, tells me the point at which I stand below Malchut yearns to open itself to the upper world. And in my imagination, I can see that interaction taking place. And what it creates, that interaction creates, is the hexagonal shape in the center. That is empty. That is the space of Aleph. That is the space where everything is and everything appears and nothing can be seen. And that's the place I like to hang out. Now, of course, my human condition stops me from doing that. I have all the limitations of a human being. But Jewish practice tells me to remember to try. And over and over every day, our rituals remind us to remember to try. And that yearning, that trying, is Jewish practice. There's no getting anywhere. For me, I'm talking personally, that trying is Jewish practice. So this is a story that I think I share with a lot of people. For me, it has the name of being a JewBu. That's how Jewish Buddhists are called now. But that doesn't quite say it for me, because I think JewBu is not a good name for this. I don't have a better name, but there's something new that I think I've created for myself that I call syncretic, of which I don't have a name, but I do have a symbol. And the symbol is the Magen David. So, okay, so that's the historical story. So now the question comes up for me: what is the connection between Buddhism and Judaism in terms of what's called non-duality? Let's put up that slide, please, Sherry. So Buddhism is called a non-dual religion. And the other example that's given of non-dual religions is Hinduism, but never Judaism. So here's a definition of non-duality: a philosophical and spiritual perspective that emphasizes the lack of fundamental separation or duality in existence. If, as we go through this, if the Shema comes to mind as something that this triggers in you, that's the whole point for me. This is apparent distinctions like subject and object or disappear, everything is interconnected, and there's one undivided unity. So it's Buddhist, it's Hindu, yet the Shema itself can be taken as a statement of non-duality. So what's up with that? So I think, again, it goes back to the tension between mainstream Judaism of God's transcendence and Neo-Hasidism's conception of God's immanence. And in my personal practice, trying to make the union between those two. So I think the Bible, Torah, raises this issue of duality in the very first word and even in the very first letter. And I'll show you why I think that. So you got to you bear with me, please. We're going through this from this is my lens on it. So I'll show you how I got there and why this is interesting to me, and just make of it what you will. Okay. So as some of you know, I'm very interested in the Hebrew letters, thanks to one of my principal teachers is a rabbi named David Wolf Blank, who Reb Irwin I know knows of him. He didn't publish anything. I had the chance to take classes with him. He has a very interesting set of individual papers that have been bound together in volumes. Rabbi Irwin's holding up a copy of it. And so Rabbi David introduced me to the idea that the letters themselves convey spiritual attributes, which about 40 years ago, a psychiatrist friend of mine told me was a crazy idea. And 20 years later, he told me, well, maybe that's so. so I'm very interested in the letters. If anybody is interested in my take on the letters, there's a course called Letters of Creation that I did during COVID that's available through the archives. Look up Letters of Creation, and you can dig into it a little bit there yourself if you want to. So how do the spiritual teachings of the letter show up? They show up through the form of the letter itself, its actual form, its numerical value, its placement in the sequence of the alphabet, all somehow, maybe through acts of imagination, maybe through acts of consciousness entering into us, as Dr. Lerner said, somehow teach us. So how does the Torah have to do with duality? So if you look at the very first letter, let's see, we'll get the first letter. Here's a story. So when God started to create the world, he reached into his toolbox, which was the Aleph Bet, which had all the aspects of creation that he could possibly want to include, we're told. And Bet was giving the honor of beginning the Torah. So this is already a teaching. Why would God begin the Torah with the second letter and not the first letter? Or any letter? Why the second letter? Well, Aleph was not chosen because it couldn't be chosen. Because the Aleph is everything. And the world is a subset of everything. So God chose the second letter, which has the numerical value of 2. And already, immediately, in Breshit, in the very first letter, the letter is telling you the world is made of this and that. So the total silence and emptiness that's God found its voice in the Bet. Aleph has no sound except the sound of everything. Bet has the sound that can be heard. And that utterance of the Bet in Breshit set all of creation in motion. And its numerical value of 2 establishes duality as the fundamental nature of creation. Where creation was only God before creation, there was only God, now there's the world of this and that. So let's look at the Bet, and there's something in the form of Bet will teach us something about its nature. So let's look up, let's share if you'd put up the slide for Bet. I'll wait for it to come up on the screen.
It's up for us. We see it.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, I don't see it, so I'll just talk about it this way. So you look at the Bet, it's closed on 3 sides and open to the left. What does that tell us? To the right of it is the Aleph, and there's a wall there. The Bet makes a wall that keeps us from going back to the Aleph, except maybe not. If you look at the bottom, there's this little tiny stub that says maybe there's a way back to the Aleph. Okay. But in general, there's a wall on the left-hand side and an opening on the right-hand side. And if you follow that opening,
Vice
what
versa.
you get is
Vice
the whole
versa.
rest of the Aleph Bet.
Vice versa, Gesher.
What's that?
Vice versa. There's a wall on the right side.
There's a wall on the right-hand side. Well, thank you. On the left-hand side, there's the opening that takes you to the rest of the Aleph Bet, that takes you to all the rest of creation that the world is built out of. So there is a teaching that the strokes of the Bet itself contain within it 3 of the 4 worlds. On the bottom is the world of Asiya, the world of our doing, of our making. And on the top is the world of Beriah, the world of our intellect. And what connects them is the stroke, the vertical stroke. That's the world of our prayers. That's the world of our emotion. That's the world of our hearts. So the Bet is teaching us, bring your heart to your thoughts, bring your heart to the actions, and by doing that, you'll connect your mind and your heart and your world. So what else? So it teaches you have to go into the world. Bet is saying go into the world, go through the Aleph Bet, all the way from Bet all the way through Tav at the end. And when you get to Tav, interestingly, when you look at the Tav, there's this little foot at the bottom of the Tav that is an echo of the little foot at the base of the Bet. And what that little foot is pointing to at the end of the base of the Tav is it's pointing to what? It's pointing back to Aleph. Going through the world and coming to Tav will bring you back to Aleph, and you'll start again. Over and over and over again. Okay, so good. So, okay, so the Bet teaches that. Let's look at the first word. The first word is Breshit. Let's look at another slide. I don't know if the slide is up. Somebody will give me a clue.
The slide is up, and
I'm sorry, you muted, Erwin?
sorry, the slide is up, and we have about 6 more minutes.
Oh no.
Oh, wait, no. 6 more minutes until we could then. 8:15. Yeah, 8:15. The next session starts at 8:25. You can slop over. That's why we made some breathing room in between.
Okay, so the first word, Breshit, there's a teaching that words have parent and children. So in this word, Breshit, the Rosh is the parent of the word. The head of the word is Rosh, the beginning. The child of the word is Beit. Rosh Beit, what? God's first house. Creation is God's first house. The sentence goes on to say, Reshit bara Elohim et hashamayim et haaretz. Duality. Heaven and earth. God's first house creates heaven and earth, duality. And the theme rolls on and on through creation. Waters above and below, the two lights in the sky, the multiplicity of seeds, two trees in the garden. It goes on and on. So, okay, I'm going to kind of wrap up a little bit. So for me, the whole Torah goes in this direction, is telling this story. The hero of the story of duality is the character of Jacob. Why do I think that? Jacob is a twin. He's a sacred twin. So many of the world's archetypes, so many of comparative mythology's archetypes are contained in the Jacob story. He's a twin. He's a trickster. He marries two women. He makes the sheep be black and white. His whole story goes on and on and on until he comes to a place called Mechanaim. Mechanaim translates as two camps. Jacob, the hero of duality, now winds up in a place called two camps. And what happens at Mechanaim is he wrestles a something, his other nature, God. The Torah is ambiguous about it. He wrestles something and nobody can prevail, and he's wounded. He becomes a wounded shaman, another archetype. He becomes the archetype of the wounded shaman. And he leaves that spot not having solved the problem of duality, but having accepted it. And the Torah goes on and on and on until we come to the Devarim, and Moses saying to the people, this thing, listen, my friends, this thing that we call God is oneness itself. But echad, not meaning one something, echad meaning one nothing. Non-duality is not this and not that. There's nothing there. And that nothing there-ness, the sound of Aleph, gives us the world. So, how does this show up? Got a couple of minutes. How does this show up in my life and life in general? A couple of ways. I'll tell you one. I'll tell you two things. I'll tell you. One is the blessing formula. I think that I have a slide I gave Sherry for a blessing formula. If you could, maybe out of sequence,
We can
Sherry, but
see
if you
it.
could put that up.
We can see it. We
This
can
is an interpretation from my Neo Hasidic point of view. Baruch means you're opening yourself to blessings. Opening yourself to blessings is a reciprocal act. Shefa flows into the world, and the world has to open to the blessing. So Baruch, bless. Atah is a very interesting word. It's a personal pronoun you. We bless you, right? Hey is a signifier for God. You think of Avram becoming Avraham, Sarai becoming Sarah. The hey put into their name is a signifier for God. In that word atah, it's made up of the signifier for God and not Aleph and Tav, but Aleph through Tav. Everything that can be created with Aleph through Tav under the aspect of the Hey. And then Adonai Yud Hey Vav Hey, those letters are the letters of was, is, and will be. Eternity. We bless everything that's been created under the aspect of eternity. So when I say Baruch Atah Adonai, that's what I hope to have in my own heart. The other thing I want to say is that on Shabbat, when we light candles, there are two candles. Duality, right? There are two candles. We light the candles, we cover our eyes, we say the blessing, and we open our eyes, and there's one light. The two candles have created one light. And the candles see each other in that light. I see you in that light. And then we enter the promised land. Then we enter consciousness. And we get to dwell in consciousness for 24 hours. And then it all begins again.
Oh, Gesher, so sumptuous, so sumptuous. I wish you could have heard what was going on here, the giggles and sighs and cracks and moans and just gasps of amazement. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Very, very
Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Um,